This summer, Simon Moro, Terry Hart, Knobs, an audio production podcast. Remember to like and subscribe.
We're going to be discussing whether or not it's important to have a technical understanding. I think I didn't even say technical correctly.
Technicality. Yeah.
We are off to a good start. I fell asleep at 3:30 a.m. last night.
Gross.
It wasn't because I was in a session. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Let's do this. So the thought around this was, I see people posting on social media and doing videos, sort of arguing about whether or not it's good to have a technical knowledge or to be really creative.
Yeah.
And it seems like almost like the analog versus digital, there's this opinion that, you know, the technical side doesn't matter, just go and make great things. And if you are technical, you're not making great things. And it's kind of like this black and white camp. And I thought it would be fun to discuss this as a concept and why you might be in one camp or the other. Let's kick it off.
Because straight away, it's another one of those cases where it's 100% grey area.
Mm-hmm.
And you just can't sit in either camp. But I can understand why people get stuck in it, because I think there's a way that you learn this art form, like making records. And you have to figure out how to actually get a mic in front of something and make that acoustic guitar sound like an acoustic guitar through speakers.
Mm-hmm.
That's not easy to do. Might sound easy to do, but it takes some time. And for the start of your career, you obsess over trying to just achieve that simple goal.
Mm.
That's not a good creative time. And you get stuck on it and you probably make terrible records because you're focusing so much on the technicality, but it's a learning process. Once that's done, then absolutely technicality means nothing. But you've always got it in the back of your head, but you can move on. But I think that's why people argue with it so much. There's people who are doing that and are really deep into that and realizing that they're not making good music.
Mm.
But they're in the middle, they're halfway down the road.
That's a really good point. And that's such a great example, because I think about probably the first decade of my career was chasing the perfect snare sound or the perfect guitar sound.
Because it's not easy.
And it's not easy. And with that frame of mind of technical, like what is technical when it comes to creativity and an output, I would agree that the technical side is not actually important.
Yeah.
But you'll probably find that the ones that worked had the technical foundation.
Yeah.
But I did spend that first decade. It was seriously up until Mix with the Masters. I was a technical engineer, where of course I was creative, but I would be.
But you get your head in your game. You get obsessed reading about compressors,
totally.
And you go or whatever. And
yes. Yeah. So there was a lot of disgust with my work, as in I'd get it done if I really like that snare sounds thin, or that vocal's too harsh, or that guitar sound doesn't sound like a Nashville record.
But the switch in the brain is when you go, okay, well I could find 30 great songs where the snare is thin.
Yeah.
But it was done by choice for a reason and serves it.
Correct.
But it's nice to have the ability to make the snare thin or fat or thick or thin or or whatever you
Correct.
want to do.
Yeah. So I get where that's coming from, but at the same time,
people are violent. It's a blood sport out there.
It is. I see people actively avoiding understanding this science, because it is a science, just like painting a picture.
Yeah.
Now you can paint a picture without any understanding of composition and contrast and color and design, and you can do that, and it might be the most amazing picture to look at. But if you had to paint a picture every day for your job, you can't rely on
There's no off days. You're coming
in.
You're being paid that day. It needs to be done that day.
Exactly. So I think for me, the TLDR is I can't think of a disadvantage of being a very technically competent creative person.
Yeah.
I think if you're only technical and doing everything by numbers, I would agree it's probably going to be a sterile sounding record unless you're leaning heavily on other people. You could be a very technical engineer with a creative producer and great artist and come up with something that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. There definitely are technical engineers though, and there's people. I mean, from yesteryear, people who worked in Abbey Road, these were literally engineers. They were building stuff to put together, but then they outsourced the job very specifically of composition and arrangement and things like that. They knew that wasn't their strength. Or there were cases like George Martin where he was just a freak at everything. Yeah. But that's less and less these days. But I feel a lot of people are saying, "Oh, don't worry about the technicalities." Like, that's all good, Karen, if you're sitting there and plugging in a Scarlett interface and 2 microphones for a podcast. Yeah. Not to bag our podcast, obviously. Yeah. But, you're doing a session with 80 channels and a bunch of vintage gear. Stuff's going to go wrong. You're going to need some sort of technical knowledge at some point, definitely.
Correct. Yeah. And I think that the technical knowledge rarely hinders, if you understand gain structure, if you understand signal flow is a great example. I feel like a lot of people never deeply understand that which is a simple concept of signal flow, and very much just end up in I can plug a microphone in, I can also plug a guitar into an effects pedal and then into the amplifier, and I can put a reverb in parallel and it stops there. But when you have that super deep understanding of signal flow, and you could be running amps in parallel and then sending like all of the sort of like parallel into series into parallel, like these really complex chains.
You get to mix in, it gets real complex real fast. Things can be in circles and all over the shop. And,
correct. Yeah. And being able to do that, for me, it fuels my creativity.
Yeah.
It gives me more creative options. So I think, I'm curious as to why. Like, is it a fear? Is it a laziness? Is it?
I think it's definitely lazy. A lot of people do get it's overwhelming, so it's easy to do a cop out. It's like those people who will. I think a lot of musicians will do this. They won't go into any effort of learning music theory, but in the end, it's hard, and they prefer not to do something that's hard when they can already play G, C, and D. So I mean, they've nailed it. It's all sorted out. Yeah. But I still agree with the other camp. The technicality is a massive disadvantage, and I've had it a million times. I was telling you the other day, I was in a mix years ago, and I needed something for this vocal effect. I plugged into this back 500. It was like a 1176 500 series.
They're really good.
Really, really cool. Yeah. And I was doing it specifically to get grit. I plugged it in and I'm like, oh man, that's sounding great. Awesome. I got all the way through the mix before I realized that I plugged into the patch bay into the holes next to it, which was a preamp, and I'm passing line level into it. Now, technically minded, I'm like, I could blow up the preamp. Like, that's not the level that's supposed to be going in there.
Yeah.
And I should have unplugged it, but then the artist side of me and the creative part of it's listening to it and going, there is nothing wrong with that sound. So I passed it through and printed it and kept it. But you know what I mean? That's something that you just never do. Whereas an idiot might walk into a studio and just start plugging things in everywhere and just listen to it and find stuff that. So it could definitely get in the way. And I think it's the same with music composition as well. That technical knowledge will definitely get in the way. The most creative people are not doing it. Beethoven knew everything there was to know, but he still went for walks in the forest to compose. Yeah, even though he's deaf. Yeah, because he needed silence. And the fact is, he wasn't sitting there going, "Oh, I wonder if I drop down a minor third." No, he wasn't. He was sitting there going, "Da da da da, nah, da 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 da, ooh, yeah, like that." Yeah, you know what I mean. It was just he was riffing. Yeah, and it's having it, but being able to put it aside and not let it consume you. So I can definitely understand why people would argue the other camp that you don't need it. Yeah, because it can definitely be detrimental.
I definitely have been in those situations where I think even when I was writing music, and I might have had a more experienced person in the ensemble, and I would say, do this, and they say, oh, you can't do that. It's like, why?
Yeah,
like
I've always hated that.
But I like how it sounds. Like it's you know?
Yeah.
And so you can't do that. And in fact, just before I had a meeting with a client who was telling me about a song that she'd mixed somewhere in the past, and when she was mixing it, there was a reverb on her voice, and she loved the reverb, and she said to the engineer, "Can you turn it? Like, I love that sound. Put it all the way to the right." And the engineer said, "No, you can't do that. It's going to be way too washed out." And anyway, she said, "Please, like, try it." Tried it, and it sounded great. And the engineer said, "You're right. Like, it sounded really great."
Well, that's rare that the engineer would say that.
It is, but it's good that they did.
Yeah.
So that's an example of the technical knowledge. If you use it to block an experiment, then I think it can be detrimental.
Yeah.
Like, just do the experiment. And unless it's like lives are at risk, do the experiment.
Absolutely, yeah. If you're that confident in your ability and your knowledge, then put it on the line. And then you might realize you're not as smart as you think you are and things like that.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with it right now with a particular song I'm looking at, and we're looking at basically panning the bass hard left and the guitars hard right because of the bottom end. Now, a younger me may have said that exactly that. So you can't do that. You need the bottom end and the center. But it's nice to have the throwback in that and say, no, that's absolutely fine. I know for a fact that a lot of Muse's first album was mixed that way because they wanted really, really bassy sounding guitars and really, really bassy sounding bass. And if you just put them on top of each other, it's a disaster. So they did that. It's an amazing album.
Yeah.
Would it be my go-to setup? Hell no. But in a situation, I'm fine to say, yeah, let's try it.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work, then I'll allow everybody to come to their own realization on that.
Yep. Agreed. I was telling you about an example of a lack of technical ability. Trying to be technical can just be a complete waste of time.
Yeah.
And this was a YouTube video that I saw, and I mentioned yesterday. What this person did was extract vocals from 3,500-ish hit songs and analyze the crest factor, which is kind of a proxy to dynamic range.
Yeah.
And the whole video is basically saying, I analyzed all of these thousands of hit songs and I worked out the dynamic range of the vocals, the crest factor of the vocals, and this is what you should do when you're mixing your vocals because this is what the hits had. And I thought, like,
I hate it.
It's a perfect example of a lack of technical ability. Like, if he was technically minded, he never would have done that experiment because, for starters, he's extracting vocals from a mastered file. So the dynamic range of those vocals are already less than they were in the mix. And regardless of the inefficiencies of the actual study, it's also completely unhelpful.
It really is.
So basically saying what you should do now is solo your vocals, measure the crest factor of your vocals, and once your vocals are sitting at the dynamic range of a mastered stem extracted vocal, then mix the song around. Like, how
was
is
the
that
end game? Like,
I don't know. And then, but what was more frightening was that the comments were overwhelmingly positive, with people saying, "Thank you so much for doing this work. This is so helpful. This is really useful." Thinking, like, I own Dynameter, which I bought when I first learned about the crest factor, and I'm like, okay, this could help for the dynamic range of streaming platforms.
Yeah.
But I never even use it anymore. It's kind of just completely irrelevant.
Unless listeners are going to start enjoying music with those sort of meters themselves, they are irrelevant. The ear is the only thing, and yeah, definitely that stuff can be useful at times, or just to have a quick glance at.
Yeah.
But yeah, slave into it. That's insane.
Yeah. So
it's like the average American and Australian live where? In the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
No, none of them do. But if we average their geological location, and I do feel for the people in the comments that do feel really good about that. There's been a lot of hacks over the years on YouTube, and some are better than others. But the thing is, people are desperate to understand this because it's not easy.
Yeah.
But I do want to ring them, and I've had a lot of assistance with the same thing. It's like, that's not the answer. There's not a cheat to this.
Yeah.
This is like the diet pill mentality where now I know that, now I can do vocal. No, unfortunately, you're going to have to just do it for years and try a million different things. And when you get something good, you're then going to have to change it because you can't just mix with one vocal sound your whole career. Otherwise, you'll have a very short career.
Correct.
It's terribly difficult and a terribly tall mountain to climb.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And you just have to accept that.
Yeah. So, you know, how does we sound like some grumpy old man talking about, you know, being very opinionated, but how can we be helpful around this subject? So my opinion is, as I think I said at the beginning, I can't think of a disadvantage of being technically competent.
Yeah.
So I think there are, especially if you want to do this professionally, I think there are really only advantages to having a technical understanding. It's detrimental if you have no creativity.
Yeah.
But I would say for anyone that is feeling like the technical side of things are a little bit confusing still, I think it is worth investing the time in at the very least learning the fundamentals.
Yeah.
So, and maybe an analogy I have is years ago when I was learning to write software, specifically web applications, and I was using the Ruby on Rails framework, which is a web app framework for developing apps using the Ruby programming language. And the first thing I did was go online and learn a Ruby on Rails course. Mm-hmm. And it taught me the framework. So I was seeing all of these patterns repeated. It's like, for example, I would see a word with an @ symbol at the front, or that same word capitalized with no @ symbol, or that same word with a colon before it and no @ symbol and not capitalized. The same word, like multiple times, and then I would see all of these patterns, and I was kind of like, I feel like I'm starting to understand it a little bit. But then a software engineer said to me, what I think you should do is just do a course on the Ruby language. So for those of you who don't know what a framework is kind of like a scaffolding that has a lot of stuff done for you. Mm-hmm. So like, think of it like a mix template.
Yeah.
So if every time I'm mixing, I had to build the same template, I'd be spending 4 to 8 hours before starting the song. There's no point. I bring up my mix framework, which is my template. So it's the same thing with these coding frameworks.
Yeah.
Like if you
the heavy liftings kind of covered too.
So for example, like there's like a model and a view and a controller. So the model is the database, the view is what the user sees in the browser, and the controller is what controls the business logic. So if I go to this URL, pull these things from the database and display them in the view. If I click that button, go to the controller, check the logic, do they have permission, where are you meant to, where do we take them next? That's the control. So in this framework, you've kind of got a lot of that stuff piped in for you. So anyway, I went to study the Ruby language, pure language, and then the framework just opened up for me because I learned that the word with the @ symbol at the front was an instance variable, which meant if I assigned a value to an instance variable @Terry, and I did that in the controller, that would mean that when I got to the view, the HTML code in the browser, every time I typed in @Terry, that variable would be displayed.
Yeah.
But then if I went to the next view, that instance variable's gone again. I learned that same word Terry with a capital T was referring to a model in the database.
And that's when the framework can start working for you.
Exactly.
And you're not enslaved to the devs about what they provided you and things like that. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so once I understood the language, the pure language and the framework, and I knew what was happening automatically, it just opened up. And I feel like a lot of people that are teaching themselves music production, they are experimenting with a framework without knowing what's happening underneath.
Yeah.
And it's so...
And with composition as well, which that's a massively common
yes.
one. I hear the argument constantly that like, I don't want to learn the theory because then I'll sound the same as everything else. Like that's so far from the truth. If you want to sound different, you have to intimately know the rules and harmonic theory and how that happens. You need to know the rules to be able to break them. Otherwise, your ear just won't be attuned to what can happen, to what you can augment or where you can take things. And those people that say I'm going for a really unique sound, so I can't use theory.
Yeah.
Well, it's G major the whole song.
Yeah.
It's just boring as hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was one of those musicians.
Yeah.
And I told myself...
This is a safe space, Simon, you can say.
Thank you. I told myself if I learn music theory, then my songs will become more generic.
Yeah.
But in reality, what happened was most of my songs sounded the same, and I abandoned ideas very quickly because I couldn't solve the problem of I need to write a bridge that fits here that I like that's different from my other song. And as you said, if I had an understanding of music theory, all of those creative problems, I would have had the solutions.
Multiple choices, a million ways to do it. And also, if you legitimately want to write completely unique music, then you know the rule and you go, okay, well, I can't do that, so let's do something else. You'll start to sound like Mars Volta very quickly, but you would need to know things really, really well in order to do that. There's just no other way around it. And it'll move into audio production as well. If you want to be unique in the job, then you need to know how not to use the gear in order to implement that.
Yeah.
Don't plug line level into preamps. I'm not going to be responsible for a bunch of preamps blowing up.
That's fair. That's fair. So yeah, I guess they're my thoughts. Is I would agree with you. The music theory, and you don't even need to be like have a doctorate in music and a doctorate in sound engineering.
No,
but it's important to have a pretty strong understanding. And I would say for anyone that is serious about making this a career, or if you've been doing it for 10 years and want to upskill, then it would be...
It's an easy avenue.
Well, go and brush up on your music theory, brush up on your engineering technicalities, especially for anyone that hasn't been forced to read the textbooks. So for anyone that's sort of been lucky enough to shadow and kind of get a grounding that way, you'd be making great records, I'm sure. But as an example, we won't drop the names, but we've been in the presence of some pretty technical, some pretty what's the word? We've been in the presence of some pretty engineers. We've been in the presence of some very reputable engineers that seem to have less technical understanding than you and I.
Yeah. And I think that's okay. Look, that's the other side of this, though, is identifying it. That you can, if you understand that you don't have the technical knowledge, and that's fine. Maybe you stick to the producer side of things and you need to work with an engineer.
Yeah. Like
understand your shortcomings and do that. And there's been some amazing groupings of people in studios that works really, really well for. And that would allow a producer to be a complete Rick Rubin.
Yeah.
He openly admits that he has no idea. He hires someone to do it. A lot of the big names, because that was the old school way that you had an assistant to plug everything in. But they come in but the person who wasn't technically minded would come up with this stupid idea, and then the technically minded person would say, well, you can't do that, but we could do this. And so it's definitely not a, what would you call it, like a way to keep out certain people.
No.
It's, if you identify that, then you can still work in this industry, but understand that there's probably a different approach that you need to make to do it.
That's a really good point about that outsourcing the technicality. Because I mean, I do that with the compositional side of things and arranging. I don't bother. I don't even bother touching that, whether I could do it or not. I mean, I used to write music, so I absolutely could. But I know that there are people that have spent the time that I've spent learning to produce and mix, other people have spent that time with their instruments, with their composition, with their arranging.
Yeah.
And I would just rather outsource to them. So that's a great point, just to outsource the engineering side if the technical thing is not your strength, and if you're either disinterested in learning it, or just I guess that's the other thing, is that some people's minds are way more creative, and less able to conceptualize the technical stuff, and that's fine. That probably
maybe
makes
they can, but they just don't want to.
That's true.
Rick Rubin specifically strikes me as someone who's like, he just doesn't care. He just doesn't want, like, has no interest. I'm sure he has the ability to.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's what I mean, is that for me, I like learning the technical stuff. I like learning the creative stuff. I find it equally motivating.
Yeah.
But if you're not motivated to learn the technical stuff, then even if you could, it's going to be harder. It's like if any sort of barrier and resistance is going to be a block. So you could actively say, well, I'm going to choose not to do this. But there has to be, it doesn't have to be, but it might be an advantage to find someone to help you with those shortcomings if we're striving to be the best that we can be.
Yeah. And I think it is the difference between, I don't know about you, I had a bunch of assistants and I'd always been able to sort of vet the two of them, because one would watch me and say, that piano sounded really cool, what'd you plug it into? And I'm like, that. And they go, okay, and they write it down. And then there'd be those few engineers who would say, why did you plug that in? So, no, that's a question. It's like, okay, I had this on the piano. Usually it works. But it does dull the brightness a bit. In this particular track, I wanted more brightness out of it and not grabby compression, but just smoothing, whatever the case may be. But understanding why we would make a decision. And you can do that with anyone, your favorite songwriter, understanding why they did that, your favorite mix engineer, why they did that, understanding the why of it, not the gear. Because there are a lot of young engineers that are like, no, the best bass sound is 1170. That's nutty sort of thinking.
Yeah.
No, the reason that it was a good bass sound was that song, that performance, and why they reached for it and why it worked in that instance. And once you understand that, then you open it up. Then the racks of gear that you could possibly have one day, they're tools for jobs that you will use and not just leave it on one thing always. And that's just getting out of that headspace, because I think a lot of those forums are just filled with that. No, you have to use this on this.
Yeah, I think that's so valuable, the approach and the why. Because as you said, writing down presets, saving tricks that you found on YouTube, they are so context dependent and disempowering for you to solve your own problems. So yeah, definitely the thing that is most important is learning process, approach, decision making, the why. Yeah, that's a really good point.
And even if those tricks in YouTube do help you, well then identify that it has helped you, and then search for, okay, why is this helping me? Come back to that question, actually look for some fundamental technical reason or even creative reason, like why does that please my ear? But I mean, this is where you can blur the line between creativity and technicality, because you can be very technical about creativity if you want to, like, but
which sort of
just nuts and bolts.
Drills the point home that it's really only an advantage to be as good at both as you possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Fight the good fight.
Fight the good fight.
Remember to like and subscribe.